Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Intel FutureGen broadcast. I am Becky, Senior Partnerships Manager at NSE. Today, we've got our very own Chris Henshaw, aka Hench, who is our Head of League Operations. Hello, Hench.
Hello.
Hello. I'm going to very quickly talk about what Intel FutureGen, the program is. It's a program we run in partnership with Intel, where we take 20 students each year that we think could be future leaders in the esports space, and those chosen 20 get access to events, industry buddies, private Q&A sessions, but we also do public broadcasts like this one, so everyone can learn and benefit from the program. So today, Chris is going to do an overview of league operations, what that is, what you should look out for when running your own event. We might have chance for a Q&A at the end, but for those who are part of the FutureGen cohort in chat, remember to keep your questions for the private session afterwards in the Google Meet. Chris, thanks so much, and take it away.
Hi. Thanks. Cool. I'll get started. As Becky already said, I'm going to do a quick overview today about kind of what is league operations, talking about some tips and things to think about when you are running your own events and planning your own events, as well as kind of an overview of the role more generally. I'm going to quickly start with like who I am and like why I feel kind of qualified to talk about this at this day. I am Chris Henshaw. I've been now working in esports for about 9 years. I started working in esports with the Null. Most of my work has been in the university space, but I do have some experience working with more professional leagues, things like ESL Prem, UK Masters when that existed, and I've done a couple of events here and there for Blizzard and Riot as a freelancer in that time. So that's kind of, yeah. And just to give you kind of an idea of kind of like what we've seen in esports in that time, like when I did start, what is 9 years ago now, it was in the university space, but it's very different landscape than we see today. We're talking the first event I actually played in had 24 teams, and it was the biggest event ever and the only event running at that time. And since then, we've seen the expansion of not only like League of Legends, which was the big game then and still is, grow from 20 to 300 teams. We've seen the introduction of all these other games and all the challenges and things they have brought with them. So to kind of quickly summarize what league operations is, the discipline of league operations is somewhat debated exactly what it covers, but overall, it is the running of any tournament or league. It is making sure everything works and runs smoothly. The exact requirements a company might expect you to do does vary quite a lot. Like you look at a lot of events like Blast, ESL, they have league operators who are basically stage technicians, but they also have people who work their way up to actually managing and planning the leagues. I'm going to try and talk about each area in more detail throughout this presentation, but the core things I see league operations as, at least from my perspective, is first off like designing, planning, scheduling all your events, making sure they work well for players, make sure they work well for partners and your own team. The next is like the more like well-known thing of like when people look at a sports equivalent of a referee, there is part of that in esports as well. You do see league operations jobs in traditional sports. They tend to be more of a job where it's more about the management and scheduling. They do have some oversight on writing rules and regulations, but in esports, we lean more towards the referee. And that's partially because we just have smaller staffs generally than big traditional sports bodies like the Premiership. The next thing that we also have to do that's really important is planning events, communicating, working with players, and making sure their logistics are planned. When we have things like our live final that recently came up, a big part of the league operations was basically making sure everyone showed up, knew where their hotel was, made sure all these things are booked, and made sure that people then eventually get paid and their expenses back, and working on that. The other thing that can't be like, I'll talk a bit more about this. I'll talk more about this as I get into the presentation. Another big thing that is really important and not necessarily something that all league operators think enough about is how you communicate with teams and explain what you're doing. One of the things that I definitely fell into earlier in my league operations career was we did a lot of things where we worked out some really clever and optimized like points tables, matchmaking, and systems that were brilliant until you try to explain them. I mean, people already still talk about how our systems are very complex, but we try our best to make sure that people understand what's going on, why their games matter, and all the things that we've worked really hard to optimize actually get communicated well to the players. But it's also the basic things like you want everyone to show up to their match. You don't want to ever have to be dealing with like the fallout of a miscommunication between two teams. So like your role is to make sure that everything's communicated, everyone reasonably shows up to the match, and you don't have any additional tension brought in by yourself, as opposed to the inevitable tension that will sometimes happen between teams. The other big thing that I'm not going to really expand on this in the presentation, but I think it's really important to be aware of this. Like league operations, like any professional discipline, it's not in isolation. It's really important to understand that your role is not necessarily just to do your job. It is to work with the wider team. Like at NSE, we have a community team. We have partnerships teams. We also have, when we're doing our finals, we're bringing broadcast. I'll talk a bit about broadcast more in this. Again, as an organization, we don't do a lot of broadcast, but a big part of most traditional esports teams is making sure that the broadcast knows what's going on. Often you'll see in like professional tournaments, there'll be a pause on stage. In my experience, it's almost inevitably because someone's headset doesn't work. Sound engineering on stages is unbelievably bad, however much you test it. Headsets don't work on esports stages, is my experience of them. And you want to be able to quickly communicate not only to the players what's going on, but understand, making sure the whole broadcast team knows what's going on and they can communicate that to your audience. And as I was saying, a big thing I won't really talk about here is working with partnerships and planning events. Most esports events do run on a sponsorship model. They're free to play. There's a lot of reasons for that I won't get into, but it does mean that we are constantly pitching for work. It's really important that you work with the partnerships team to help them better understand what you can do, what they can sell against, what ways when a brand might come back to us and ask, actually, I want to run this event as an elimination tournament, or I want to include alumni, or I want to make it much shorter or much longer, and you kind of have to go back and explain to them why that wouldn't work. Like one of the like a classic one that we have to talk about all the time right now is like battle royales. Battle royales are obviously very popular in the esports space. However, they have a lot of issues for like community tournaments where they're really quite difficult to run when you don't know how many. If you want it to be open entry, because if you don't know exactly how many people are showing up, it's quite difficult to set up the servers, make sure all the lobbies have the right number of people. And there's normally a better option that will get higher engagement anyway. So it's really important to talk to partnerships and help them understand what we actually want to do, what we can do. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to tournament operations, if our organization is quite good at it, I've worked with organizations. If you do not work well with partnerships, they will sell something that you can't do, and then you'll have to try and do it anyway. So it's really important for your own sake, not just for like the organization's sake, that you properly communicate with the rest of the team and can work with them on projects. So what I think are the really important things to think about in league operations then, and just kind of like what really makes you good at this role. League operations, it's worth saying, is the vast majority of time it is a role that is judged on its failures, not its successes. Most of the time, like if no one ever watches a football match and says, wow, that referee did a great job, but they do sure as hell remember when they make a mistake. It is really important in league operations to think about what you're doing in advance and make sure that you're calm and you run everything in a very consistent way. The things where you can go above and beyond that when it comes to planning events, and this is what kind of separates this is kind of where you start to separate yourself from the kind of tournament referee who's running a bog standard event and starting to look about actually running good events that people want to go to, that they remember. Is you have to start understanding why are you running events. for us, as I've said, a lot of it is university space, but there's all sorts of different reasons to run esports events, and I'll talk about how this affects your decision making and planning it. But you have to understand why you're running the event. Is it for the broadcast? I see if you're looking at something like the LEC, like Riot's League of Legends Professional League, their ultimate goal is to promote League of Legends, to try and get more people to play League of Legends. They also have some goals regarding sponsors and selling sponsorship, but ultimately they want to create a high quality broadcast. They are not so much focused on the players, whereas like in university esports, if we have an issue with a broadcast, we're not going to keep people late. We're going to tell them to start their game and we'll put something else on the stream if there's delays. Whereas if you're looking at a professional tournament where their goals are about the broadcast, you can't take that down. And you just have to start thinking about that. Very similar link to like why you're running the event and like what you're trying to promote and achieve. You also have to understand like who you're running it for. As I say, for us, like when we look at our tournaments, we are running it for students who are playing in their free time. Most of our events are just about people who are doing this for social reasons. And we have to but there's a whole different group of people, and we have to do our best to understand who those different group of people are. And the final thing I'd say, the other big thing that I think I see a lot of league operators have issues with, especially when they're starting out. I've talked a lot about use the comparison of a referee a lot. One of the mistakes I think people make is not understanding that you're there to support players. You're there to make their lives easier. You're there to make the tournament run well. Most players will come to you when they're frustrated. They're not out to get you. You're not out to get them. They are there because they want to have the best experience. Inevitably, you only talk to them when something has gone wrong, so they'll often come to you frustrated. But as soon as they realize you're on their side, you do have to sometimes enforce punishments. But ultimately, you shouldn't want to do that. You want to run an event that runs smoothly. You want to get everything done well, and you want to work with your community to run the best event and build up a relationship with your players and make sure things run well. And then like the final thing that I think is really important is planning. One of the biggest mistakes I see in league operations is trying to fix things after they've broken. There's so many things you can do with planning, especially if you run similar tournaments over and over again. You can learn what goes wrong, when these tensions occur. I was saying before, you often get tensions between teams. I see people talk about that as something that's inevitable and you can't necessarily resolve. But if you plan for everything, you really can reduce these problems. Like one of the big things that we have, as I was saying earlier, if you have two teams who have a dispute about who showed up on time, who showed up, if it's unclear when the match starts, like sometimes you'll often have two teams come to us and message us saying the other team hasn't shown up. And then one of the players leaves from a team because they think they've got a default win. But at that point, the problem's really created by a communication issue. That if we'd planned properly and we'd made sure everything was clear to the players from like moment one, wouldn't have this tension. And you'll have these two teams arguing with each other when really it's a problem that should have been avoided by good planning on your end. So I'm going to quickly talk about a bit more in depth on like the areas I was talking about earlier, talking a bit about planning events. I'm going to use two, and then talking a bit about rules and like communicating with players some more. The first thing I wanted to talk about is I wanted to look at two example events. I want to talk about our British University Esports Championship. Hopefully most of you know what this is, but for those who don't, this is our flagship event. It actually consists of a series of lots of different tournaments, and it has a championships points table, which awards across those. We call these like our national championships. I don't know. We used to call them that. I can't just call them winter seasons now. Winter season, spring season. And if you win the winter season, you win NSE colloquially. So that is what we're looking at. These run weekly games, run for two splits a year. And then we have the Stay at Home series you may be less familiar with. The series we originally started in lockdown, hence the name, but it is a series where primarily we've used it in the past to work with Monster Energy. It's promoting Monster Energy. Our concept for it originally was a LAN but online. So if any of you have been to LAN tournaments, which aren't as popular, but for old school players, they are what I got introduced to. when I started playing. So I have a fun spot for them where you have this 2-3 day event where all the games are played. You have in this very compact time as opposed to over like an 8-week season. When we first looked to plan BUEC, we were looking at it's one of my favorite tournaments to run. We were in a really free spot of when we set this up. Our goals were to run a tournament that was to grow our community. We wanted to not only grow our community, we wanted to grow the university esports community as a whole. This is because at the time, and still now, we reckon about 40 to 50% of students are gamers, and about 0.5%, 1% play in university esports. So it's not just about growing our market share, it's about growing the audience as a whole. And that's always really fun to do. We wanted to create an event that we could explain to staff. Again, this is kind of to go back to explain, we want to work with university staff to help it grow and help it get more recognition. And then we did want to create an event that, as much as it used a lot of time, it still did give us options to work with partners, and it gave us options to run other events that then could be work with partners. We wanted to create one organic product, which is the championship. That's really, it is now sponsored, and that's great, but that's always been like a secondary goal. And we really want to prioritize for this event students, and we want to prioritize our participants over anyone else. So that's like our first event. And then that's quite in contrast to when we looked at Stay at Home series, which is an event that we got to lockdown. First lockdown, we went people more engaged in gaming. We're also looking to try and increase our partnership with Monster, where we can help them promote their product more. And when we looked at this event, we were already targeting engaged players. We were trying to create something that was great, but the primary goal and the main person we're making this tournament for is Monster Energy. We want to make sure it hits their objectives. We want the players to have a good time and play. They're still part of our community, but it becomes a very different focus. And I'll talk a little about how that affected the design of these tournaments. So, as I was saying, for the championship itself, the big focus for us is this gameplay. It was making sure students have a good time and they keep coming back. The challenge we have with student esports is, unlike other brands, we really have one sign-up period a year. We get most of our new students sign up at Freshers Fairs, and if they don't sign up then, we get about another 10% sign up throughout the year, but that's really when the vast majority join us. So if we want to grow our community, we need to create a really good experience. And when that comes to players, what we focused on is we don't really do a stream until the finals, because we're not trying to sell any sponsorship. All the people we want to talk to and get involved with are playing in the tournament, so it doesn't make sense to do that. We instead focus really on skill-based matchups. We create formats that give multiple divisions. There's always something for even the lower skill teams to play for. We work a lot with the lower skill teams compared to, we work a lot with game players who are lower skill, who still want a competitive experience. It's not about having this premium product to show off. It's about having this event which anyone can enter and still have a good time. We also then, when we're looking at that, because we're talking about growth, when we picked what games go in the championship, we sometimes take punts on games we're not sure are already popular, because we want to grow those communities and then have them be big communities in 2 or 3 years. And they don't necessarily need to be big in the first year we run them. Then when we have something like Stay at Home series, which is much more focused on a partner, you instantly see the difference in how we run it. We have a much shorter qualification period where everyone still gets to play, but we're really looking to get a top 8 teams to create an interesting stream. Instead of having a points table that rewards societies and helps societies be invested in their teams, we instead moved to we ran bounty boards, which were a lot more about individual achievement. That meant that we talked a lot more about Monster Energy. There's lots of opportunities for the players in it. Instead of having long-term objectives for the lower skill players, we give you things like monster drops. If you watch our stream, we have a chance to win monster just watching the stream. We give you Monster Energy we set various different goals like most kills, most assists, all these individual goals that would give ways of players getting involved. This does mean that we do have some trade-off on we don't spend as much time making sure that everyone has, it's you see this more in professional esports as well. This is the closest we come to special esports. When you run a qualifier for who's going to get to the next major, the most important thing is getting the best team. whereas the qualifier itself is not as important for players. It's not the experience. The experience is winning it. The experience isn't the event itself, and that's a bit more where Stay at Home and Sit Day wants. We still have our community and we're still engaged with them, so obviously we try and make it as fun for everyone as possible. But you can clearly see the shift in focus. So that's kind of brief overview of like planning of events. The big things that we also see, one of the big things in league operations is these writing rules and then enforcing these regulations. The key things I just wanted to say is this is intimidating to a lot of people, but it's a lot easier than people think it is. 90% of rules that you choose should be intuitive. Most people don't read the rule book, and that is just the reality of running an event. You need to find out what the community already expects the rules to be, stick to them, write out this long rule book which has all those rules in. Like for example, for us, we say this is a tournament that's open to students. What is a student is a term very much up to interpretation, and we've kind of got to choose what that is. And we have a long set of rules, but people only read that when they're not sure they count. Most people, you just need to say, show up to your match on time. Show up to your match on time. You have to be a student. Teams need to be 5 to 10 players, etc. Those very basic facts, and you really need to focus on the things that are different. The main reason you write a rule book in so much detail is for yourself, and when you come around to actually enforcing the rules, it's really important when enforcing rules. This is kind of obvious, but it's really important that you're consistent. It's often more important that you are consistent than your rulebook is actually good. As I say, most rules are set by the community, and there'll be a couple of things that you get some free choice on. For example, one of the things we do is we allow coaches for the championship because, again, we're focused on community. We want teams to have subs around. We want societies to get involved. It does give teams with coaches a slight advantage, but the trade-off's totally worth it for us. And some people think that's a bad rule, but if you tell them that's the rule before the tournament starts and you enforce it consistently, everyone kind of accepts it. When you have real rules issues is when you're seen to be doing it inconsistently or it's unclear what the rules are. When you do have to actually enforce your rules, the other thing to do consistently is understand which rules are important to you and which ones you take a very strong stance on. For example, an obvious one is like any kind of cheating. Everyone is very strict on that. But for us, like one of the things that we're considered, again, people say we're not, sometimes people disagree with this, but because we're consistent, ultimately people accept it. When it comes to adding subs to our tournaments, we're very lenient. We allow people to play as long as they are students. If you sign up and you're playing with someone who's not a student, obviously that's considered cheating. But if you play with players who are students who haven't filled out the right form, we'll give you a slap on the wrist in the first instance. Like maybe we'll give you like deduct some points or give you, it depends on the game to what kind of slap on the wrist punishment you can do, but that's the kind of thing we do. And the other thing that I think is really important and worth saying when you are looking at running your own events and enforcing these rules, when you do have to make these decisions, you need to talk to players and get information from them, but you shouldn't discuss what you think your ruling is going to be in front of them. Any thinking you have to do, any like brainstorming should be done with the other admins away from the team. You never want to say something to a player that you're going to take back. Like that's a lot. That is the work. It's a really bad player experience. It leaves if you do that, even if you then swap from a wrong decision to a correct decision in front of them, both teams will feel like they've been cheated because they'll both feel like they were denied the correct ruling, even if you ruled in favor of a team. And the other thing is to say is as much as possible, you want to try and remain calm. It's kind of a joke in the admin team that like temperament is everything for running these events. I always tell people that when they show up on an admin night, if they haven't eaten yet, go away, eat well, sleep well, and be in a good mood because this is not a place you can come into stressed. And that, the final thing I wanted to quickly cover, I think I've roughly kept the schedule, is talking about actually running the tournaments and communication. As I've said before, running a tournament, the key to it is good planning. And when it actually comes to like a live event or actually on get day, you need to, for it to run well, you need to have planned. You want to make sure that everything is planned, But on top of that, you want to plan redundancy into your system. We generally run our tournaments we run quite a small team, but reality is we're always in a position where if like someone's internet went down, we'd still be fine. We always try and keep enough people around that we have redundancy and everything could go well. The other thing that people don't really consider is having backup plans. Inevitably, when one of the things working in the esports industry, most of the time you don't control your own servers. That's the main thing that happens. Sometimes you see power outages on a national scale, but that's rarer. But you need to have a backup plan for if everything breaks. If my website went down, if Discord went down, if that happened this you need to have a plan for how you're going to adapt before it happens and know at what point you are going to cancel the event before you get there. So I always say that one of the easier decisions to make is when the game servers go down, because if no one in Europe can play Overwatch tonight, we're not playing Overwatch tonight. We will wait for an hour for it to return. If we hit that hour and it's not looks like it's coming back, we will cancel. Then the final thing that I'd say on planning is test everything. This is particularly true for live events, but you should test all your kit extensively for exactly what you're doing, and you should test your backup kit as well. And be aware that you still need redundancy in the system, because there's so many times that I have set up a player's PC, checked it myself, walked away, and then 10 seconds later they said the sound's not working, and I know it was working 10 seconds ago. So really do that. And the other thing I want to do is, again, on the planning, is when we talk about communication to players, like to me, there's two real big parts of communication. And a lot of people only really focus on the communication during the event. People should come into the event knowing roughly what they should do. And most people won't read stuff you send them. So it's important to send it multiple times if it's really important. You want to send information to people on the platform they actually engage with. All the tournament information should be available on your website, but you want to make anything key that you put out on socials. You want to email people. You want to talk to people. A big part of why we have captains meetings is a lot of that information shouldn't be new. There will be last minute things that get added, but we want another chance to make sure everyone has heard the things that are key and important to what we have to say. The other thing I want to say about communication, and it's again kind of like about, is the way you communicate also sets a tone for the event. You've got to understand that like a lot of the tone and how the event will run is based on like what you do. You set the culture. There's a lot of different cultures in esports. We try and be a very open community where everyone is coming to enjoy the games, and that we're not too sick. There are some people who take it very seriously and we want them to be able to, but we want to make sure everyone is welcome, and setting your tone and being as calm really does help in that kind of communication. When it actually comes to communicating at the event, you want to make sure that it is streamlined. It's obvious to people how they do it. A big thing, what we do is, one of the things that I see that not everyone does is we want to make sure that people feel like they are being heard straight away, even if they're waiting. Like we have waiting rooms and we have public like help rooms, so people can see that they're like sixth in the queue and people being talked to. You can have a lot of different communication systems before the tournament, but once you actually get to the live tournament, you want to have it all in one place so people can see what's going on and things don't get missed. You don't want to be talking in private messages, at least not like the first message. So it might be, for example, if a player has an issue with, they suspect a player on the other team isn't a student, you want them to jump in a help room or stick a message in like a public admin chat. So any admin can pick it up, they can talk to that person. Once they then establish this is like a more serious issue, they can then move to private messages. But you want to make sure that your communication method will be seen by multiple admins, because messages do get lost when they get sent to individual admins. Like that individual admin might have gone to like grab a drink or something, or there's all sorts of issues of not having group chats. And I think that is most of what I wanted to talk about. I'm just having a quick look through. I could talk more about other areas, but those are really the key areas I wanted to highlight of what I think is really important to league operations. Just to reiterate that it's about planning event. It really is about planning events that fit your audience, that are well communicated, and that way you have tournaments that run themselves. Like if you if you set up a tournament perfectly, you shouldn't have to do anything. You shouldn't have to answer. It should all be obvious to the players. The only things you'd have to deal with is when there is something like an internet outage or a server problem, something that is actually out of your hands. Yeah, I think that's all I wanted to say, Becky.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Chris. That was super insightful. So yeah, we're going to move over to the private session with the cohort. If anyone is interested on seeing any of the previous talks we've had, go to nse.gg. On the sidebar, there's we've got the Intel FutureGen hub. So click on that. You'll see all of the old. Oh, actually, wait. We do have one question. We're going to do one. Wait, what? We're going to do one question. The question is advice for people specifically trying to work on their networking skills within league ops. I know it can be hard. Oh, it's a joke question. I believe. Is it? I know
I
it can
don't
be
think
hard
so.
being recognizable. Is it a joke question?
I don't think it is a joke.
It's not a joke question. Advice for
I-
people specifically trying to work on their networking skills within league ops.
I'd say it's something that is quite difficult to do. Unfortunately, one of the things that is true about esports right now is there are very few league ops roles, and therefore it really is making sure that you do try and get involved with the core companies and work with them. Like in the UK, you can start. University space is a great place to start, but you can also start in all sorts of communities, like the Smash community. There's Insomnia. I'd always shout out to Epic LAN. They're always looking for new people, and if you're in the Leicester area, they're also looking for people at ESL all the time. It is worth saying with a lot of these roles, it's often really good to run your own events because when it comes to actually looking for a lot of the full-time jobs, a lot of the stage admin work that these jobs, entry-level jobs, tend to be aren't necessarily all the experience that you need. Like, for obvious reason, when you're a professional company, you do not let the volunteers design the events, or like the low-level admins design the events. And just running like even like your own Smash events or like university tournaments can make a huge difference, like to your, like, it really bulks out your resume. As far as networking, I'm never very good at networking, to be honest. Just if you ever find someone, my role was just making myself available, no matter what they said, no matter how unavailable I was, until I became their default person to message. Because it's got better, but it's a bit of a wild west still of these roles.
Awesome. Okay, well, that's the only question. Sorry to MacFet. That was MacFet's question. I don't think you're a joke. So yeah, you can see any of the old other broadcasts we've got on NSE.gg. Go to the Intel FutureGen hub. You can see all of the broadcasts we've got on there. So yeah, thanks so much for watching, everyone. FutureGen cohort, go over to the Google Meet, and I'll see you there in a second. Goodbye, everyone.